various colors on this map of Mexico indicate the location of the 150-odd Indian tribes. Some of these, such as the Seris, had not yet reached the Stone Age. They dressed in the uncured skins of seabirds. Their food, which they ate raw, they tore apart with their hands like wild beasts. Others of these ancient races, such as the Aztecs, were far more advanced than our own American redskins, although they did have a few barbarous practices. They not only sacrificed birds and animals to their pagan gods, but human beings as well. Jagged obsidian knives were used to cut out the beating hearts of the victims. During some bloody rites, as many as 70,000 were sacrificed. The bodies were often thrown to the 300 wild animals in Moctezuma's zoo, and arms and legs protruding from the cages was a common sight. Sometimes the victims were given their freedom if they could defeat 5 Aztec warriors in succession. They didn't have much chance, however, for the Aztecs used war clubs edged with razor-sharp obsidian, while they were given clubs edged only with feathers. Several of the ancient races had attained a high degree of civilization. Mexico City, then called Tenochtitlan, was an Indian metropolis of 1/5 people. It boasted paved streets, stone houses, elaborate palaces, and even large athletic stadiums. In these latter, a ball game was played that was similar to modern basketball. When a player knocked the rubber ball through the stone ring, the spectators took to their heels, for custom decreed that he should receive all their clothing and jewelry. In stone astronomical observatories, the priests studied the stars, predicted eclipses, and invented a system of time that was exact to the day for a period of more than 1/3 of a million years. Our Christian world did not evolve a calendar as accurate as the Aztec calendar stone until 1,000 years later. These strange people, who surpassed the ancient Egyptians and Babylonians in mathematics and astronomy, differed greatly in appearance from North American Indians. Warriors dressed to represent birds or animals and always went to battle in full regalia in order to frighten their enemies. Clothing was made from cotton, wool, and the skins of wild beasts. Sometimes robes in striking designs were made from the iridescent feathers of tropical birds. Nobles dressed with great elegance wore elaborate headdresses and adorned themselves with quantities of jewelry of gold, jade, and other semi-precious stones. Although we know a great deal about the Aztecs, Mayas, and Zapotecs, very little is known of most of the other early races. What records were found were burned by the Spanish invaders. Today, there remain but 51 of the original 150 Indian races. The colors on the map indicate the location of these present-day tribes. Some of these tribes are practically unknown, others unclassified, and very few have been properly studied by the scientists. The types pictured here represent but a few of the present-day groups. Those that live in the valleys or near large centers of population have lost many of their old customs, have acquired many Mexicanisms, and are more or less Christianized. But those that live in the mountains and the more inaccessible regions retain their early culture and have changed but little since the time of Cortez. In some of these sections, only 1 or 2% of the Indians have learned any Spanish in the last 400 years. Each group has its individual style of dress and its old tribal form of government. A few of these Indian races still resent white infiltration. The Yaqui Nation has a peace treaty with the Mexican government, while the Huicals and the Celtals do not tolerate white settlers in their territory. Some of these isolated tribes still worship idols. Others pay homage to pagan deities to whom they sacrifice living animals in bloody rites. Worship of the sun and moon is common. The religion of the Huicals and Tarahumaras is built around a powerful narcotic drug which kills sex desire and creates fantastic color visions. The Wabis believe that every time a baby is born, an alligator with a twin soul comes into the world. They say that if someone shoots the alligator, its human counterpart will die also. Many tribes practice polygamy, and some permit child marriages when the bride is but 6 to 10 years old. Decapitating live roosters, eating sacred white dogs, and many other unbelievable customs are still practiced. Already 100 of the original 150 Indian races have completely vanished, and with time, the remaining 51 will also disappear or be absorbed by modern civilization. Even now, there remain but 250 Seri Indians, 150 Lacandones, and only 2 or 3 individuals who still remember the old Chiapanec tongue. To preserve for posterity the customs, dances, religious ceremonies, and manner of living of these little-known Indian tribes before they had completely died out, Mr. Harry Wright conceived the idea of making a series of ethnographic colored moving pictures. Mr. Wright, who is the founder of the Cinema Club of Mexico, was not long in putting this worthwhile undertaking into effect. His first step was to secure the assistance of the explorer photographer Ed Myers, who had already visited various Indian groups, making ethnographic collections for British and American museums. To obtain the pictures thus far taken, Mr. Myers has had to travel more than 2,000 miles by horseback into the most inaccessible parts of Mexico, and has suffered unbelievable hardships. In spite of taking all preventative measures possible, he contracted typhoid fever, dysentery, and some unknown tropical disease. It took him over 2 years to rid himself of a half-dozen different kinds of intestinal parasites that he picked up on his last jungle trip. On many occasions, Myers has also had to risk his life to secure this most unusual cinema record. He was captured 3 times by armed Indians, and in the Wicol region, a companion of his was killed by a murderous Indian band. In fact, so great were the hardships and dangers that bites of poisonous scorpions and hundreds of flesh-burrowing insects seemed but slight discomfort by comparison. When the series of pictures is completed, Mr. Wright plans to donate copies of these unique films to scientific institutions especially interested in the ethnology of the Middle American Indian.